Hello. So, in this video I want to talk about something in the UK that should be a cultural symbol but has been increasingly politicised. And what I want to talk about is this. Can you see that? This is a poppy, a paper poppy. There's different forms. There's plastic poppies, there's brooch style poppies, there's different styles. But basically this is a paper poppy, which is probably the most common type. And if you're a visitor in the UK, you'll notice that a lot of British people wear these around this time of the year. So first of all, I'll give you a little bit of background if you don't know what it's about, and then I want to express my thoughts on this. Basically, the poppy was designated in 1921 as a way to remember war dead, and it came from a Canadian poet who had served in the trenches, John McCrae, on Flanders Field. And I think the idea was that these poppies were growing on the battlefield after the battle, so they sort of became symbolic of all those men who had lost their lives in the First World War. And they've subsequently been used to commemorate victims of every war since. And this is especially used in the United Kingdom, I believe in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. I'm not sure about other countries. In the United States, although the US was actually the first country to use these sort of poppies, I'm not sure if they have an equivalent today. In France there's a blue cornflower, but I'm not sure if they use it as widely as we use the poppy. In recent years, Ukraine has been using a sort of poppy to remember World War II, because their original symbol, which I believe was, which is references for sure. Yes, Ukraine initially used the ribbon of St. George, but that has been associated with pro-Russian separatists. So around the world there's different sort of symbols to remember war dead. But I think it's, without question, some of the most widely used war memorial symbols in this way is in the UK. So I think this country, more so than others, has there is this. I can give a context to what I'm talking about here, because I think it's more obvious in Britain than in other countries. Okay, my personal stance in it is that the poppy commemorates those who fought and died for this country. And as someone who cares very much for my country, I try to wear it every 11th of November. The reason we choose that date is because the 11th of November is the day World War I ended on the Western Front, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. So it's a very symbolic day, and all over the UK there is big commemorations. The Queen always lays a wreath at the Cenotaph in London, usually accompanied by the Prime Minister and other leading politicians and other leading dignitaries. It's quite a big event in the UK, certainly much more than in other European countries, even though other European countries had greater losses. I mean, France and Germany both lost a lot more people in the world wars. In the case of Germany, perhaps it's because obviously there's a different context there. There was war guilt, especially in the case of the Second World War. But France, even in France, which was a major ally, it's not really commemorated in the same way. So in Britain we are quite, this is something that is quite obvious in Britain. The only other countries I can think of that remember war in this sort of way is the United States, Russia, because they really take the Great Patriotic War seriously, and they certainly commemorate that in a profound way, and some of the Commonwealth countries. But certainly no other European country, and most other countries in the world, I don't think, commemorate war in this sort of way. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's just an observation. Even China, which is a country that has experienced an absolute abundance of warfare, they don't sort of commemorate anything to do with World War II or the Chinese Civil War, nothing on a big scale anyway. They do have a national day for the foundation of the People's Republic of China, but I don't see any sort of commemoration for Allied victory in World War II. Perhaps that's because of the political change in China from the nationalists to the communists. But certainly it's fair to say that in Britain this is quite a big thing. How do I feel about that? Well, I've mixed opinions. Personally, I wear the poppy. And there's just one thing I'd like to say about the poppy. Unfortunately, it's become politicised when it really shouldn't be. The idea of the poppy is to commemorate war dead, not to make a political statement. But unfortunately, both advocates of the poppy and opponents of the poppy have increasingly politicised it. Now, on one hand, you have opponents of the poppy, and in my opinion, they misunderstand what the poppy means. They feel that wearing a poppy is somehow endorsing foreign policy. That they somehow think that if you wear a red poppy, then you support all policies that the government of the day puts forth. Now, that is very misguided. The poppy is solely, or at least should be solely, to remember war dead. It's not to say a particular war was right or wrong. So if they really believe that is what the poppy is about, I think they're misguided. Because I've heard people say, oh, we wear the white poppy for peace. Now, I respect their right to do that, but I think they're just misinformed about the red poppy. The red poppy is not a pro-war symbol at all. And that is something that I get a little bit frustrated by, that people think it is a pro-war symbol. It is not. It is solely to commemorate those who lost their lives. On the other hand, you have increasingly vocal people who say things like, these men fought and died for our freedom, so you should wear the poppy. It's like trying to basically force and impose it on the people. That is something I strongly disagree with. A few years ago, the news presenter Jon Snow refused to wear a poppy, and he sort of said he wasn't going to cave into poppy fascism, as he called it. His words, not mine. And there have been other public figures who have attracted controversy for not wearing one. You'll notice around this time of year, most public figures on almost every programme will wear a poppy. So it's something that is almost expected. I personally don't really understand why someone would have a problem wearing it, because it is not a political symbol. It is not an endorsement of any particular policy. However, I don't believe that people should be compelled to wear it, and it is astoundingly hypocritical to say that these men and women fought and died for our freedom, so you have to wear that. But surely that contradicts the very purpose of freedom and democracy. If you're dictating to people what they should and shouldn't wear, it's ridiculous. So I personally wear the poppy, and I support the right of those who choose not to wear it. I don't think it should be an obligation on anyone. I think those who choose not to wear it, maybe they misunderstand what it's really about, because it is not intended as a political symbol. Unfortunately, those who disagree with them, some of them have got very nationalistic and frankly very aggressive. I've just unliked the page I otherwise supported, because I saw that a lot of the users on that page were attacking someone, a celebrity, for refusing to wear the poppy, and the sort of things they were coming out with was disgusting, simply because this guy didn't want to wear a poppy. Now, that is not my vision of freedom. That is not my idea of a democratic country, bullying and vilifying people because they don't want to wear something. It's ridiculous. And actually, I've seen soldiers even say that they don't think it should be an obligation. And that brings me to another point I want to cover. I'm going to bring it into this video because it's connected to it. There is a militarization of British society that makes me very uncomfortable. Now, I want to try and explain this. I'm not talking about this in a North Korean way. The UK has a relatively small army for a country of this size. We've an army of about 130,000, and we have a population of 64 million, so it's a relatively small army in proportion to the population of the country. So I'm not talking about militarization in that sense, but what I mean is, there is a lot of people, and I believe this is fueled by the tabloid press, who hide behind respect for the military, respect for soldiers, to basically hide a very deeply entrenched xenophobia and at times outright racism towards outsiders. There is an extreme nationalism at play here, and it makes me very uncomfortable, because what those soldiers fought for in World War II was against fascism. And what we are seeing is a militarization of society. It's not fascism, but it's definitely not healthy, and I do not like it one little bit. I don't believe anybody in a democratic society should be forced to do anything unless it's a legal issue, and unless they are deliberately doing something that is damaging to society. But I don't think anyone should be bullied into um, conformity in that sort of way. So a lot of people in Britain, especially, you see this all the time on the tabloid press, they sort of hide behind respect for soldiers or respect for the military to come out with statements that they would not say in other circumstances, very thuggish sort of things. I'll try and give an example of what I'm talking about. A few years ago there was a student, and he was involved in the Freshers event, and basically the Freshers event was promoting cheap drinks, and he'd done something very stupid and crude. He ended up urinating on a war memorial. Now, like everyone, I thought that was very disrespectful, and it was unpleasant. But the response to that, and it was stirred up by the Daily Mail and co, was death threats against this young man, basically for a moment's stupidity. There was no way he'd done that deliberately. He was out of his mind, and it's not an excuse. He shouldn't have got drunk. But the point I'm making with that is there is a thuggishness and a neo-nationalism that comes about whenever the military is involved, and it makes me very uncomfortable. And freedom of speech doesn't exist when the military is involved in this country, because if someone has a view that is seen as dissenting in any way, then they're branded on patriotic or scum or a card or all sorts of things. So the sort of hate that was driven against that young man for a moment's stupidity was disgusting. I mean, people were saying that the memorial was to respect young men who had given their lives in war, and I can understand why people were angry about that act of vandalism. But then the sort of comments that people were coming out with, they were calling for him to go to jail and stuff. That's a lot of rubbish. I mean, why destroy another young man's life? That they couldn't seem to see the irony of what they were advocating, and I really, really have no time for that sort of nationalistic bullshit, that sort of thuggishness that is driven by militarism. And on the same token, I do not believe that soldiers as people are above criticism. So if a soldier does something wrong, he or she should be criticised just like anyone else. I've nothing against soldiers at all. I believe they're very brave people, and I do respect them. That's why I wear the poppy. But I really, really feel uncomfortable with those idiots who think that just because someone wears a uniform they're above criticism. So if there are circumstances where soldiers have done something wrong, whether they're engaged in antisocial behaviour or whether they have done something wrong in performing their duties, they should be held accountable for that. Because not only do they put a stain on their uniform, they give this country a bad image when they do that. And what pisses me off is there's almost no freedom of expression involved when it comes to the military, and a lot of idiots in the... I mean, I'm not saying there's any rules against it, but what I'm talking about here is public attitudes. There is something in British society that is deeply, in people's mindset, that is deeply militarised, and I really don't like it. And this has nothing to do with people agreeing or disagreeing with foreign policy. In fact, a lot of people disagree with government policy, but there is something that makes people very nationalistic and defensive whenever the military is involved, in a way that they would not have the same sort of standards in other circumstances. And that really... I mean, for example, had that young man urinated on a memorial for something else, I do not think there would have been the same sort of backlash. And what the Daily Mail and other disgusting tabloids wanted to do was basically destroy his name for life because of one moment's stupidity. Like, they were basically treating him like he was a rapist or something. They were treating it like it was a serious crime, whereas what it actually was a moment's thoughtlessness. So, in conclusion, I personally wear the poppy. I do it to remember those who have died, because this country, many, many, many men have sacrificed their lives, and women as well. So I do it to remember those people, and I have profound respect for the courage and the sacrifice that they showed. But I do not believe that this should be something that people are obliged and forced to wear and bullied if they don't wear it. That is not freedom. That is not democracy. So I am a little bit disillusioned with the politicisation of the poppy. People, in my view, they probably should wear it to remember those who died, but in no way should they be forced or vilified if they don't wear it. That's ridiculous.